It was one of those nights when everything seemed heavy. My heart was broken, the pain of a recent breakup still vivid, and the world around me appeared dull, as if all the color had faded, leaving me trapped in a gray fog of sorrow. My aunt noticed my mood and, as usual, decided to step in with her unique way of helping. She was the unpredictable one in the family, fun, spontaneous, and a bit reckless, especially after a drink or two, but she had a heart of gold and was always there for me, knowing exactly when I needed her most. That evening, she arrived at my door with her friend Leah, who was just as lively and carefree, with a laugh that could make even the most serious person smile. They were already tipsy, giggling like schoolgirls, bottles of wine in hand, and barged into my apartment. "Come on, kid," my aunt said, slightly slurring but determined. "We're not letting you wallow in this any longer." I tried to protest, but before I could say anything, they pushed me onto the couch. Leah poured me a glass of wine, while my aunt rummaged through my kitchen for snacks. I knew this was their way of helping, and even though I wasn't in the mood for company, I didn't have the energy to resist, so I let them take over, hoping their antics would distract me from the ache in my chest. The night started lightheartedly with them sharing stories and trying to make me laugh. But as the hours passed and the wine flowed, the conversation deepened, becoming more intimate. My aunt, always an open book, began talking about her past heartaches, things I had never known. She spoke with such raw emotion, and I realized that despite her carefree exterior, she had experienced her own share of pain. Leah joined in, sharing her own stories of failed relationships and near misses with love. It was oddly comforting to hear these two women, older and wiser, talk about their vulnerabilities. They had been through heartbreak but had come out stronger, still laughing, still living. Somehow, this gave me hope. Maybe I could make it through this too. At some point, the wine hit me harder than I realized, and the room felt warmer. My sadness seemed to blur. My aunt, noticing the change, moved closer, placing her hand on my shoulder. "You know," she said softly, her voice serious now, "heartbreak doesn't define you. You're more than this pain. You deserve happiness, love, all of it." I looked at her, surprised by the tenderness in her tone. Leah, sitting across from us, nodded in agreement. There was something different in the way they were looking at me, something I couldn't quite understand. It wasn't just sympathy or concern. There was a spark of something else. Before I could process it, my aunt leaned in closer, her lips brushing my cheek in a soft, lingering kiss. I froze, unsure of what to do, my heart racing. Leah watched, her eyes locked on mine, a small, knowing smile on her lips. "Relax," my aunt whispered, her breath warm against my skin. "You deserve to feel good." I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning with confusion and desire. It felt wrong, but the way they were both looking at me, the way their touches lingered, made it hard to think clearly. My body responded before my mind could catch up, and I leaned into my aunt's embrace. Leah crossed the room and sat beside me, her fingers lightly tracing the curve of my jaw. "You're too hard on yourself," she murmured, her lips inches from mine. "Let us take care of you tonight." I didn't resist when Leah's lips met mine in a slow, soft kiss. It was sweet, almost hesitant, as though she was giving me the chance to pull away if I wanted. But I didn't. I couldn't. The weight of my heartbreak seemed to lift, replaced by the warmth of their touch and their closeness. My aunt's hands moved to my shoulders, massaging gently, her breath hot against my neck. "You've been through enough," she whispered. "Let go." And I did. I let go of the pain, the sadness, the confusion. In that moment, nothing mattered except how they made me feel. Wanted, cared for, loved in a way I hadn't in a long time. Their touches were soft but insistent, their kisses slow and lingering. I found myself lost in the sensation, in the moment. Time blurred as the night went on, the three of us tangled on the couch. It was slow, gentle, almost dreamlike, as if they were trying to erase every bit of hurt with each touch and each kiss. They were so attentive, so careful, as if they knew exactly what I needed without me saying a word. My aunt's fingers traced down my arm, sending shivers through my body, while Leah's lips pressed against my neck, her kisses soft but deliberate. The room was filled with the quiet sounds of our breathing, the rustle of fabric as we moved together, and the faint hum of the city outside. Everything else faded away. The heartbreak, the sadness, the confusion. In that moment, all that mattered was the warmth of their bodies, the softness of their touch, and the feeling of being completely, utterly cared for. At some point, I must have drifted off to sleep because the next thing I knew, I woke up to the soft light of dawn filtering through the windows. My aunt and Leah were still there, curled up on either side of me, their arms draped over me in a protective embrace. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of heartbreak. Instead, I felt lighter. Not completely healed, but better. As if the night had helped me take the first step toward moving on. As I lay there, feeling the warmth of their bodies next to mine, my mind drifted back to the events of the night before. The weight of my emotions hadn't disappeared completely, but it had lessened, replaced by something softer, more manageable. I still felt a bit confused, but there was also an unexpected sense of comfort. Maybe it was the closeness, the way they had been there for me. I needed it more than ever. Or perhaps it was simply the fact that, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel so isolated. My aunt stirred beside me, her arm tightening around my waist as she slowly began to wake. She mumbled something unintelligible before opening her eyes and offering me a sleepy smile. Her hair was messy, and her eyes still half closed, but there was something about the way she looked at me that was comforting, like everything that had happened was all right, like it was exactly what I needed. "Morning," she whispered, her voice soft and raspy from sleep. "Morning," I replied, my voice barely audible. She stretched, brushing against me as she sat up. For a moment, the awkwardness of the situation threatened to creep in, but before I could overthink it, Leah stirred on the other side of me, her arm draped across my chest. She blinked her eyes open, and a lazy smile appeared when she saw us. "Looks like someone needed a good night's rest," Leah teased, her voice playful but warm. She shifted closer, resting her head on my shoulder, her hand gently tracing patterns on my arm. Despite the odd circumstances, I couldn't help but smile. It felt safe. There was no judgment, no awkwardness, just a quiet understanding that the previous night had been about comfort, about healing, and maybe even something deeper. "Thank you," I said softly, looking between the two of them, my voice wavering with the weight of my gratitude. "For last night, for everything." My aunt smiled and reached out to ruffle my hair, her gesture playful yet full of affection. "That's what family's for," she said. "We've all been through it. You're not alone in this, okay? You're never alone." Leah nodded in agreement, her hand still resting lightly on my arm. "Heartbreak sucks," she said, her voice more serious now. "But it doesn't define you, and it doesn't last forever. You'll find your way through this." Their words were simple but carried a weight I hadn't realized I needed to hear. For so long, I had been trapped in my own mind, convinced the pain of losing someone I loved would never fade. But now, with the warmth of their presence around me, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in ages. Hope. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the room. It was peaceful, a sharp contrast to the emotional storm I had been facing for weeks. In that peace, I found the strength to take a deep breath, to release some of the hurt that had weighed me down. Eventually, my aunt stretched and stood up, her movements slow and relaxed. She made her way to the kitchen, muttering something about coffee while Leah stayed by my side, her head resting against my shoulder. "Feeling any better?" Leah asked softly, her voice tentative. I nodded, my heart lighter than it had been in days. "Yeah," I said honestly. "I think I am." Leah smiled, her fingers tracing patterns on my arm. "Good. You deserve to feel good," she said, her words lingering in the air. For a moment, I felt a connection between us that went beyond just the previous night. There was something unspoken, something deeper that I couldn't quite articulate, but I didn't need to. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to analyze every feeling, every emotion. I just let it be. As the morning went on, the three of us settled into an easy rhythm. My aunt brewed coffee, and we sat around the small kitchen table, sipping our cups in comfortable silence. The remnants of the previous night still lingered, but it didn't feel heavy or awkward. It just was, and that was okay. Eventually, Leah stood up and stretched, her arms reaching above her head. "I should probably get going," she said, though her tone was reluctant, as if she wasn't quite ready to leave the calm we had created. "But if you ever need someone to talk to or just hang out with, You know where to find me." I smiled, feeling warmth in my chest at her offer. "Thank you, Leah," I said sincerely. "I really appreciate that." She leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead before gathering her things and heading for the door. My aunt and I walked her out, and after a few more hugs and goodbyes, we were left alone in the quiet of my apartment. I turned to my aunt, feeling a mix of emotions swirling inside me. "I don't know what I would have done without you," I admitted, my voice thick with gratitude. She shrugged, but her eyes were soft. "That's what I'm here for, kid," she said, "to help you through the tough times." She paused, then added with a smile, "and maybe to get a little tipsy and make a fool of myself in the process." I laughed, surprised at how light it felt. "Well, it worked," I said. "I feel better, lighter." My aunt smiled, her expression warm and proud. "Good, that's all that matters." We stood there for a moment, the quiet settling around us like a blanket, and in that stillness, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was starting to heal. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead would still have its ups and downs, but for the first time since my heartbreak, I didn't feel like I was facing it alone. As my aunt pulled me into one last hug before leaving, I knew that no matter what happened next, I would be okay. Because I had people who cared about me, people who would pick me up when I stumbled, and people who would remind me over and over again that I was stronger than I thought. With that, I closed the door behind her, a sense of peace settling over me. It wasn't the end of my heartbreak, but it was a new beginning, and for now, that was enough. As I stood there, leaning against the door, the quiet of the apartment felt different. Not lonely, but peaceful. The kind of quiet that allows you to breathe deeply, to release the tension that had built up inside for so long. The ache of my heartbreak hadn't vanished, but the sharp edges had softened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could move forward. I walked over to the couch, the spot where the night before had unfolded. Memories of my aunt and Leah's comforting presence flooded back. Their touch, their closeness. It was exactly what I needed. But as the morning light poured in, I felt something else stir within me. Something deeper than just gratitude or relief. A warmth spread through my chest, a longing I hadn't allowed myself to feel in so long. I sat down, my fingers tracing the fabric of the couch, replaying the moments from the night before. The gentle kisses, the way their hands had moved over me with such care, the way they made me feel like I was worthy of being loved, even amid my heartbreak. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts, and for a moment I wondered if I had imagined it. But then it came again, a little louder, more insistent. My heart quickened, though I couldn't explain why, and when I opened the door, there she was. Leah, standing in the hallway, her gaze locking with mine with an intensity that caught me off guard. Her hand rested on the doorframe, and for a moment neither of us spoke. It was as if the air between us crackled, heavy with everything left unsaid the night before. "I couldn't leave without seeing you again," she whispered softly. Her words made my heart race, and I stepped back to let her in. She walked inside slowly, her eyes never leaving mine, the tension between us thick with unspoken feelings. I closed the door behind her, feeling the weight of the space between us, as though it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Leah moved closer, her steps deliberate, until she was right in front of me. Her hand reached up, fingers brushing my cheek lightly, sending a shiver through me at the softness of her touch. "I know last night was unexpected," she began, her voice low, filled with something I couldn't quite place. "But I can't stop thinking about you." Her words hung in the air, and I struggled to find a response. My mind was a whirlwind, but all I could focus on was the way her touch lingered on my skin, her gaze holding mine with such intensity. Before I could speak, she closed the gap between us, her lips capturing mine in a gentle, hesitant kiss. It was slow, tender, but full of longing. I melted into her, my hands instinctively pulling her closer. Her kiss deepened, her hands cupping my face, and I lost myself in the warmth of her lips, the sweetness of her breath. Time seemed to stand still, the world around us fading into nothingness. There was nothing but the two of us, tangled in each other's embrace. Her lips moved against mine with a tenderness that made my heart ache, and I realized just how much I had been craving this. The closeness, the intimacy, the feeling of being wanted. When she finally pulled back, we were both breathing heavily, the space between us charged with something undeniable. Her eyes searched mine, as though seeking reassurance, permission to continue. "I'm sorry if this is too much," she whispered, her breath warm against my lips. "But I couldn't leave without knowing if you felt the same." I didn't hesitate. My hands tightened on her waist, pulling her even closer, until there was no space between us. "I do," I murmured against her lips before capturing her in another kiss, this one deeper, more urgent. Leah's hands found their way to my hair, tangling in the strands as she kissed me back with a hunger that matched my own. It was as if everything we'd been holding back flooded to the surface in that moment, pouring out in every kiss, every touch. I backed up, pulling her with me, until we were by the couch where everything had begun. She pushed me gently down onto the cushions, her lips never leaving mine as she followed, straddling my lap and wrapping her arms around my neck. The feeling of her body against mine sent a rush of heat through me, and I couldn't stop the soft moan that escaped my lips. Her kisses grew deeper, more passionate, each one more intoxicating than the last. My hands roamed over her back, tracing the curve of her spine as I pulled her closer, needing to feel her, to lose myself in the warmth of her body. She broke the kiss only to trail her lips down my neck, her breath hot against my skin. I tilted my head back, offering her more access, as she pressed soft, lingering kisses along my throat. "You're beautiful," she murmured against my skin, her voice sending shivers down my spine. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her words made my heart race, and I tangled my fingers in her hair, guiding her back to my lips for another deep, searing kiss. It was as if we were both caught in the intensity of the moment, unable to stop, unable to get enough of each other. The heat between us built, the air thick with desire, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to fully embrace the moment. There was no overthinking, no second guessing, just the feeling of Leah's lips on mine, her body against mine, and the overwhelming sense of rightness that came with it. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about the past, about the heartbreak or the pain. I wasn't worried about the future or what would happen between us. All I cared about was how she made me feel in that moment. Alive, cherished, wanted. And for now, that was more than enough.